Now, before we start writing any code whatsoever, let us take a moment to understand what data types mean and what are the basic data types that we are looking at. Now, to do this, I'm going to take you back a little bit. Recall when we discussed variables first. This was for many of you in context of Scratch. We described variables as boxes with labels, which I think is a very good analogy. But beyond that, we did not really care about what the box contained, right? So we just moved on, and it was all fine. But it turns out that in Python and in many other languages, in fact, we have to think about what type of data a given box or a variable contains. So there's a variable, it has got a name and all right, but we are concerned about what type of data is stored in there. Now notice here I'm emphasizing on the word type, because that's what really we are interested in. Now, this itself is a large topic, but I'm going to keep it very simple for now. I'm going to give you a broad classification, which I think will be useful for now. Now, this is not exhaustive, but it's really good enough for now. Now, think about it. What kind of values do we really store inside a variable? One big usage is, let's say, numbers. For example, we could store, let's say in a game we could store a score inside the variable, or we could use a variable for lives, or we could store it for levels, and so on and so forth. We have done that many times. Also, we see that variables can be used to store names, for example, words, or say country name, or for example, let's say some kind of a person's name, and so on and so forth. So that's the first level of classification we'll make. That is my variable storing a number or not storing a number. Now, in fact, at this point of time, I'm only interested in three types: float, integer, string. If it's a number, then it's either a float or integer. We'll come back to this. But if it is not a number, quite likely it is a string. In fact, let's assume it is a string because basically it's a sequence of characters. So, for example, like I said, a person's name or a country's name, or say a sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4, or some ABCD, these are all strings. Now, coming back to numbers, we again make a further classification. Number, does it contain a decimal place or does it not contain a decimal place? Now, if the number contains a decimal place, we call it a float in Python. If it doesn't contain a decimal place, we call it an integer, right? For example, 1.8, 2.11, 1.2, 2.00, these are all floats because notice there is a decimal place over here. On the other hand, like say 2, 3, 8, 10, 104, -4, and so on and so forth, they're all integers because they do not have a decimal place. Now, before I move forward, let us take some examples because examples make things much more clearer. I'm going to use this particular command called the type command to figure out what kind of data type I am dealing with. So I say type, for example, I say, with a single quote A, B, C, say A, B, C, D. Now notice here, this single quote is basically telling this compiler, the interpreter that, hey, look, I want this ABCD to be treated as an entire sequence of characters. And hence, if I do this, it tells me class str. Now, you can ignore this class for now. We can come back to this later. But str implies that this is a string, which is not a surprise because really we put it all inside single quotes. Now we can also put this in double quotes. We have already seen this. So if I, let's say, did, put my own name, let's say, if I did this, A equals to Vineet, and I say type of, for example, A, now type small bracket, the curly bracket, sorry, the round brackets in A, and I see again a string because again, I want this to be seen completely as one sequence of things. Now, on the other hand, let's say I did type of 4, let's say it's a type of 4, then that's going to be class int because like I told you, this is a number. It doesn't have those, quotations. So it's not a string, it's a number. On top of that, this number does not have a decimal place, hence it is an integer. Let's take one more example. If I went and did type, let's say 41, say 44, then I again get an integer because once again, this is a number and it doesn't have a decimal place. On the other hand, let's say I went and did 44.12. Now this is no longer an integer. It is a number, all right, but it is a number with decimal places. 44.12, 0.12 is a decimal place, and hence it's a float. Now I can also give you one more example, which let's take a negative number. Let's say I did minus 44. So maybe let's make it minus 440. That will be an integer because again, negative, all right, number, but no decimal place. But the moment I put minus 440.002, then it becomes 001, it becomes a float. In fact, if I did even minus 440, say minus 440.00, this will also be a float. Now, this might confuse you a little bit, but remember, number with a decimal place, the way the interpreter is looking at it is different from a number with with no decimal place. So number without decimal place, so type minus 440 was an integer, but the same number in the value is now a float. Now, what does it really mean? Let's say I say, let's say some year is equal to say 2006. Now, notice I am putting these single quotes, which means that I want this to be seen as a string. So I do this. Now, if I say type, say, year 2006, it says it's a string. On the other hand, let's say I call it, let's say year one, another variable, and I call it say 2006, this time without numbers, without quotation. Then if I say type, say year one, now this is an integer because this is a number without a decimal place. Now you might wonder, okay, all right, this is all fine, but what does this really mean? Yeah. Now to make it more clear, I'm just going to, give you this, let's say, analogy, or not analogy, actually this explanation. Like I said, once it's being treated as a number, it's exactly how you learn about numbers in mathematics, which is that every digit has a certain face value and a place value. So for example, 2006 here, place value of 2 is 2000 and face value of 2 is 2. Now, because this is being seen like a natural, like a number that we deal in mathematics, let's say. On the other hand, when I think of this as a string, it is no longer being viewed as a number. In fact, the interpreter is looking at it as a collection of characters. So, which means that it's looking at it as 2006. There is no, there's no special value attached to, let's say, 2 or 6 because it's just like characters stitched together. That's a string. In fact, on that note, you would have realized that 2006.0, even though having the same mathematical value as 2006, in fact is not seen same as 2006 by the interpreter because 2006.0 is a float, 2006 is an integer. So keep this table in mind. We will come back to this again and again in practice. We will have to be cognizant of what kind of variables we are dealing with, what kind of data types we are dealing with, and hence this will be quite useful. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.